basically what you'll need to do this, you'll need some paper and a pen and a ruler, or pencil as well. You'll need an X-Acto knife. You'll need an awl, a hammer, and like a block of wood or something to hammer on. And one of these hole punches helps a lot. And of course you'll need the leather to make the toggle out of. This is just a fairly lightweight veg tan. You can use pretty much any leather as long as it's thin enough that you can roll. So to make the toggle, or to make the pattern for the toggle, rather, I measured the width of the existing toggles. So if you're making it for something new, you don't really have to worry about matching this. If you're making it for something, you want to try to match it up as much as possible. And so then I just took a strip of leather of that right size and rolled it to figure out what my dimension was. And so I figured if I did it 1.5 inches wide, which is what this is, and then did 1.5 inches long, it would make it. And then this strip is just 1/4 inch. And then I cut a little bit of a point on the end, and that turns out that that point is a little bit too narrow, or a little too blunt. So I have to cut it a little bit more pointy, more sharp in the next time I do it. So what you're going to want to do after you've drawn your pattern and cut it out is you have to then trace the toggle design onto the piece of leather. And I'm going to try here to get 2 out of this little scrap. And so I kind of just want to get it as tight to that edge as possible. And then you just trace around it. It can be fairly roughly. Doesn't have to be totally exact. Yep. There you go. Now the next one we'll have to go in a little bit more creatively. Kind of want to not knock off that corner too much. And obviously you want to trace onto the flesh side of the skin. You don't want to trace on the actual skin side, because then you're not going to be able to get those markings out. Some people like to trace with Sharpies. I prefer pen. Gives me a more accurate line. And keeping in mind that these are toggles for shoes, they're not necessarily, they don't have to be the most attractive thing in the world. And so that's the 2 of them traced. I need to do a total of 4. I've already done 1. So I'll have to do a 3rd at some point. So then you just want to cut them out, and it's not, and it's, you know, just remembering from that other video that you don't want to pull the leather. You just want to have it cut nice and evenly through. And if you have to do multiple passes to cut it, then that's good. You just make sure that you cut it all the way through. So that's the first one cut out. And then what you want to do is you want to wet this with, could be preferably room temperature water. Not too cold, not too hot. So I'm going to go do that, and then I will show you what to do next. So now that you have it wet, you want to take it and you want to roll it as tightly as you can. And I'm just crunching it in because it's somewhat pliable at this point. And then you want to roll it to about there. And then from here, you take your awl and you just punch a hole clean through. And if you don't have an awl, you can use a fairly small nail to get that done. Now what you want to do is unroll it, so you have your 3 holes, or in this case a little bit of a 4th, but that's okay. You take your hole punch. You could use an awl. Historically, they probably would have used an awl instead of doing this, because they didn't have these. But this is just a very quick and easy way to do it. And you punch that hole bigger. So now you have all these holes. So now you want to roll it so that the holes line up, and then you basically just you can kind of squish this around a bit because it is somewhat pliable, and you can make it a lot more blunt, or a lot more pointy, and then you just shove it in the hole. I am going to have to cut this here just to remove that little piece, getting it lined up. And then sometimes you can tuck it through without having to. You can just tuck it through the holes one at a time. And sometimes it does help to grip the end of it with a pair of pliers to actually be able to pull it through properly. And then you just kind of squish it all together. And then you just pull it tight. And being careful not to grip it too tight, that you snap the leather off. But so that's basically how I do these toggles. They're pretty easy. They can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, but that's sort of the nature of working with things by hand. So, yeah. They can be used for all kinds of things. They can be used on pouches to hold the pouch shut instead of using antler or bone. They can be used to hold, obviously, shoes and a bunch of other things. Anything that needs to be secured, like the flaps on a tent, something. These can be used and stitched onto the side of the tent to keep it together. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this comes in handy.